Hello all, hope you're all doing well. We are continuing with our weekly portion review, and this week we are in the portion of Balak. This is the famous portion where King Balak sends the prophet, the Gentile prophet, Balaam, to curse the people of Israel. Fascinating story, famous story with his donkey and the angel uh, standing before them. But as we do, we want to focus on one of these concepts, and I want to discuss this idea of Balaam. Who is this person? Was he truly wicked? Right? We see that God entrusts this prophetic and spiritual power to someone that is considered evil, but how is this possible? Now, we have to understand that despite Balaam's involvement with really spiritual practices that were rooted in a more baser side of human nature, this was more resembling of certain esoteric traditions, blending magic, manipulation, a lot of sensuality, and the Torah clearly acknowledges, though, that he was on an elevated stature. And we see that the verse itself says, and the Spirit of God came upon him, right? We have this in Numbers 24 too. Now, Maimonides writes that in the Guide of the Perplexed, he writes that Balaam had moments of worthiness and he had moments of corruption. And when he has prophecy, when it descends upon him, this is on these fleeting times where he is showing spiritual worthiness. Now, if we think about it, this is actually a profound insight into human nature. Right? A person could reach great spiritual clarity in moments of him being showing integrity, but that doesn't mean that he can't fall morally or spiritually speaking afterwards. Right now, while the sages did label Balaam the Rasha, the wicked man, right? A deeper question is, what form did this wickedness take? Right? What did it actually represent? Now, Balaam represents an ideology which is similar to Korach, which we've read a few weeks ago, within the Jewish people, yet he is representing it on a much grander and global scale. Right? His mission was to really halt the Jewish destiny right at the threshold of its fulfillment. Right before the Israelites could actually enter the land of Israel and become a historic force on the world stage, he stops them, or he attempts to stop them. Right? Balaam's role mirrors, in a certain sense, or it's like an archetype of what we see in the book of Genesis that Laban participates in. Right? He is trying to obstruct Jacob at the time from leaving Haran. Right, and our tradition teaches us, and what we mentioned in the Passover Seder, which is that Laban sought to uproot all. Right, and as long as Jacob was remaining in his small community that was dependent on Aram, right, Laban then could accept him. Right, he even benefits from him being there. But once Jacob becomes an independent nation, right, once he transforms into Israel, and he's then is enacting as a spiritual alternative to Aram, then we're seeing him as an opposition. So here too, when Israel is wandering in the wilderness, right, and it's immersed in the Torah study under Moses, there's no global opposition to this. It's not really a political threat, right? But once they defeated Sihon and began to appear on the world stage as a people that has a moral mission, wants to show political sovereignty, right? Then we see this resistance starting to erupt. And this is really the key, that the nations aren't threatened by our Torah, but they are threatened by our success, right? The backlash doesn't come because we had spiritual teachings, but it's because we started to act as a sovereign force shaping history. Now, God didn't choose us to dwell forever inside the Beit Midrash, right? The intellectual study halls alone, right? But he actually wants us to rectify the entire world. And that, of course, requires a state, a nation, with all its complex mechanisms, ultimately. And that's why this is very relevant for today, right? With the political return to Zion, right? This is really threatening the spiritual framework of the nations. Right? They're witnessing an alternative spiritual power blossoming really before their eyes. And this is precisely why the responsibility, the great responsibility, is placed upon our shoulders. And we have to realize that to be a light unto the nations during this extraordinary time is really what we're being asked to do. And throughout all of history, this pattern repeats itself, right? Every time Israel attempts to rise from exile to fulfill its mission, a final external force tries to delay this ascent. And in the wake of October 7th, and in the current war fronts we're dealing with right now, it's clear that we are once again at this threshold of historic shift, right? And just as Balaam tried to curse the Jews and the Jewish people at the edge of their destiny, so here too today we see enemies are trying to stop us from the unfolding of this divine plan. But just like Balaam, right, their curses ultimately will end up be turning into blessings. And this is not just a war of rockets and weapons, but this is a spiritual battle over the future of the light in the whole world. And we as Israelites have to, and our allies have to rise with strength and faith and moral clarity, understand that our return to the land is not just political, but it's actually prophetic. And the redemption of the whole world begins here in Israel. I wish us all a Shabbat Shalom, a Shabbat of clarity, and a Shabbat of peace. Take care.